Life is a mirror reflecting back what I believe. I want you to go back a long time for you, or let me go back a long time for me. I'm going to go back to 1958. I was 7. Ooh, I gave away my age, didn't I? That's just bodily. Mentally, I'm 15. My wife doesn't like that. Too bad. I remember I was going for my first communion. I was raised in a Catholic family. My mother came from Sicily, so Catholicism was the only known way of being. My father came from a Polish immigrant family. The only way they knew was being Catholic, and so I was brought up in a very Catholic area in Dearborn, Michigan. And I remember as I prepared for my first Holy Communion and my first confession. You know, you have to have your first confession before you have your first Holy Communion, because that's the way it is. You had to know what you went to confession for. So in order to know what you went to confession for, you had to know that there was sin. And so what better way to teach you sin than the 10 Commandments? And so I can remember going to my first confession. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been all of my life since I made my last confession, because I was 7. And I said, I disobeyed my mother and father so many times. I told a few lies. I snuck a hamburger on Friday. Back then, it was a mortal sin to eat meat on a Friday. Isn't that funny? I snuck a hamburger on a Friday, and today I'm a vegan. Think about that. Boy, there's something going on there. But let's go back. Remember the commandments, the story of the commandments. Moses went up to the mountain, and he saw God, and God said, I am that I am. And we had that talk already about the I am that I am. But then God gave him these commandments, and he walked down with these 3 tablets. And he walked down with these 3 tablets. As he walked down, one fell and broke. And Moses said, the hell with that tablet. And then he gave us the 10 Commandments. And I don't know if I remember them all, because it's been a long time since I've really focused on those commandments. But it was basically, thou shalt not have false gods above myself. Thou shalt not speak the Lord's name in vain. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt honor thy mother and father. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not bear false witness against God. And thou shalt not commit adultery. I think that was one. Or that's one my parents made up. I forget which. And then I remember, so I was taught that you had to go to confession. So confession meant you had to go into this room, not be seen, but the sliding door would open and this voice would come out, how long has it been since your last confession, my child? And it would be the priest. And then you would do it, and then there would be forgiveness, and you would get, I want you to do 4 Our Fathers, 3 Hail Marys, 2 Glory Bees, and 4 acts of contrition. And I always thought of it as it was punishment. It was penance. And so as I evolved, I didn't believe in this idea of sin. And then as I started to study, I understood that the idea of sin meant to miss the mark. It's an archery term that says we're pointed at a target. When we don't hit the target we're pointed at, we've missed the mark, okay? So let's go back to the commandments. Thou shalt honor thy father and mother, meaning we must honor the male and the female within each of us. We must honor the intellect and the heart within each of us. You see, that was the definition of the male and female. We must not have false gods before us. We must understand, think about this, we must understand that God is everything. That there isn't a God out here. There's a God everywhere. We must not worship false gods. Think about that. We must not think money is everything, that our body is everything, but the very life that we breathe is God in expression. To act as if we covet thy neighbor's goods or covet thy neighbor's wife, what is that a sign of? It means we do not recognize our oneness with God because we are seeking for something outside of ourselves to bring us joy, in that we want what our neighbor has or what someone else has that fills us and brings us that joy. We must not bear false witness. We cannot deny, listen to this is good. We cannot deny who we are. Bearing false witness means we are saying things about who we are that are not true. So what is sin? The only sin we ever commit is when we accept the values and experiences of others as our own, and they become the basis of how we live. Really process that. Because let's go back to the very essence of what we believe. We believe that God is all there is. We believe that spirit is all there is. We believe that consciousness is all there is. We believe that the divine beingness is all there is. We believe that universal intelligence is all there is. Call it God, call it potato, it doesn't matter what you call it, but that we believe in a power and a presence that is everything, right? If that power and presence is everything, then we are it. That is the truth. That is the only truth. And the sin or missing the mark is when we think or act that we are not that. And thinking or acting that we are not that also means when we think and act that someone else is not that. You see, that fits right in with what Jesus says. You must love God above all else, knowing everything is God, and which means you must love yourself and you must love others. So not only do you see that the power is within you, you see the power is within everyone. This act that we have of going to confession was simply saying, it's an acknowledgement, oh, I missed the mark, now how can I go back? And I used to think when they said the glory bees, the Hail Marys, and the Our Fathers, it was a punishment. But in reality, it wasn't being punishment, even though that's how we perceived it. It was about how do we reconnect with the divine. So as we reconnect with the divine, we're no longer missing the mark, we're no longer missing the mark, we're tapped in, we're tuned in, and we're turned on to all that we are. Isn't that beautiful? So what happened in this grand transformation of this idea of love that was brought forth by the avatar Jesus, that's all he taught was love, is that over 2,000 years there was ritual, there was dogma, there were all of these things added on from a man perspective, and I'm saying man specifically as men, because men wrote the Bible. They did not allow women to write the Bible. Women's voice was not heard. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene was never brought in. So man wrote the Bible from that perspective and created God in his image instead of allowing us to see God ourselves in God's image. So originally, when I wrote this talk, or I thought about this talk, I thought about what does it mean to be an individual? And that's the premise where I started. See, to be an individual, isn't that the greatest sin? To accept the values and experiences of another and to base our life on them? Isn't that the greatest sin? Because what are we doing? We're denying that we are the unique and whole and perfect expression of life itself. Every time I start doing something to please someone else when it's not being authentic, I don't feel good. Anyone here ever been in a relationship where you tried to please the other person and it just didn't work? And no matter what you did, it wasn't even their response to you, but it was the response you had in yourself, that you were sacrificing yourself. You were giving away a piece of who you were to make them happy. And even if they gave you a great feedback, for a moment, you felt like doo-doo inside. I've done that. I can't tell you how many times I did that in the corporate world. I would sacrifice the authenticity of who Lee was and what Lee's purpose was that I determine. You see, a lot of times I get this idea that, I'm waiting to hear God's purpose. Well, if there's no God out there, where's that purpose going to come from? It's got to come from within you. You're the person who knows your purpose. No one else can possibly know your purpose but yourself. And people say, well, I listen, I don't know. It's a constant asking. It's a constant being open. The idea about what were the commandments, what was confession. I've been asking that question for years and years and years. I sat down in the silence this morning and I said, oh my God, the questions, the commandments weren't literal. Confession wasn't as it was taught to me. It was something bigger. It was something easier. It was something simpler. You see, in spirituality, in this idea of spirituality, let me explain what spirituality is from my perspective so we're talking the same language. Spirituality for me is the experience of being connected. Does that make sense? It's as simple as that. There's no mystical thing about it. It's when I feel that I am tapped in, tuned in to the energy of the divine that you are. In other words, I am not in judgment. I'm not in attachment. I'm seeing you as whole, perfect, as and complete, and I am being me as whole, perfect, and complete. And then we exchange in this energy of light, of love. I forgot where I was, but I was in a conversation with someone. And I was so in tune to that person in that conversation. When I finished, someone walked up and said, your energies just came together and I saw them blending and I couldn't even see where the two of you began and separated. Think about the idea of what is energy. It's who we are. Think about it when two people vibrate at the same energy. At that moment, when they're connected, those energies come together and you don't know where they begin and end. What is that? The experience of oneness. You see, that's what we're seeking. We're not seeking a mate for life. We're seeking to have an experience of oneness in every moment. Ooh, this idea of mate for life is just bull crunch. It's man-made. It's for the purpose of raising a family. Do you understand that? Because we got away from the tribal way of raising a family, where the village raised a family. We got away so it became two people raising a family. And so we didn't think beyond that scope, and so we came together. And we said marriage is the way. And marriage has been an institution for what, about 150 years for the common folk? That's it. It's not been around for thousands of years like we've been led to believe. It's just not been there. It's been around so that we can pass our estates on. That's why the Catholic Church said priests cannot marry, because if they cannot marry, then whatever their estate is goes right back to the church. You see, there was an ulterior motive there. It wasn't about being celibate. I found that out in the seminary at the age of 15, and that's why I left. I knew celibacy was not my chosen path. Any 15-year-old boy would probably know that if he listened. Probably, I don't know what, I'm going to say from a 15-year-old boy's point of view, just because in this life, I don't know what it feels like to be a 15-year-old girl. I have no idea. So ladies, forgive me for just being a male on this issue. I have no idea. But what I do know is I reflect back to what limited dating I did before I met my wife and married her. Each woman that I met, all she really ever wanted, as I look back, was to be treated as a unique and whole and perfect person. She didn't care about anything else. She wanted to be accepted for who she was. And anytime I put any idea upon her that was different than that, I got pushback. A lot of pushback. I should have been listening, saying, oh, wait a second. The pushback's trying to tell me something. But I didn't listen. I was too young. I was unaware. You see, this is what the journey is. The journey is becoming aware. And every moment of every day, we go in and out of awareness. We're falling in and out of awareness. And everything that's happening around us is trying to make us aware, or we fall into judgment. You following that? What's happening with my favorite drama today? My favorite drama today is the NFL. I love the drama that's happening in the NFL. You've got wife beating. One person's now suspended after all of this hoopla. You've got people who are being accused of hiding the truth, of masking it. You've got another person who's been convicted of hitting his partner, and because he's even been convicted, because he's appealing, he's still playing. And you've got owners saying, well, them playing is more important than what they did. And then you've got the women's movement coming in saying, this is unacceptable. You've got the other people saying, well, no, this is okay, we're dealing with it. And what you're finding out is that all of this confusion is stirring a brouhaha, and you say, why? It's to help us become more aware. And then what else happened this week? The greatest running back playing the game today has been accused of beating his child. Now, I'm not judging that individual, because when that individual was brought up, taking a stick to hit your child was normal. It was normal. Anyone here been brought up with a little bit of a belt action or any of that? My God, our parents would all be in jail. In other words, half of the world of the United States would be in prison on top of those already in there. So think about it. Did he do something that in today's world is wrong or considered not appropriate as a parent? Yes. Why? Because he just wasn't aware that things have changed. He was just living unconsciously. He was living at the external version of the commandment instead of going beneath and saying, what did the commandment say? Here's the truth. If you're going to honor the aspect that you are the individualization of God, if you're going to try to embrace this idea, then you've got to become aware. You've got to be thinking all the time. When I do this, am I doing this as a highest expression of love? You see, it's not what would Jesus do, although that's the idea of what would Jesus would do. The idea is, are you doing this as the highest expression of love? And when you're doing it, are you being your authentic self? And is that authentic self the self that you've chosen yourself to be? You see, that's the key thing. How many people are the person they've chosen, or how many people here are the person that has been molded by society because we have what? We have accepted the values and experiences of others, and we have made ourselves in that image and likeness, and it is not us, and we are suffering. We are in extreme suffering and pain and anguish, and that's why today, think about this, that's why today, how many people are on antidepressants? There's a great number of people on antidepressants. They're calling us manic, they're calling us ADHD, ADD, they're calling us bipolar, they're calling us all of these different things because we have built a society that says you must fit into this box, and you're taking an infinite individual with an expression that's bigger than life and saying we must fit in this box, and we're saying, no, I can't do that. And we beat them down, and we beat them down, and they don't have the choice. They're not thinking clearly and freely. And then what happens? They're depressed. They feel hopeless. They feel no possibility of escaping. And all they have to do is say, I am a child of God. I am free. I can be anything I want. And I don't give a rat's tush about what anyone else thinks or says about who I am. I'm stepping out into my greatness, and I will never, ever, ever be small again. Can you buy into that idea? Think about it. When you think about living your dream, does it scare you? If it scares you, is it because of something someone said? Is it because you feel someone might be disappointed? Or when you think about that dream, is it your heart saying, go for it. I love it. This is you. This is the joy. This is the beauty. This is the peace. This is why you're here. You see, the why we are here is one purpose: to create and experience life. That's it. It's not to please anyone. It's not to do anything. It's to create and experience life. That's it. And we have been given no bounds from which to do it. We have no rules. There are no rules for us. There is a law, and the law of cause and effect is always working. And when you step into someone's toes, well, you've gone beyond the way you should be using the law. Does that make sense? I have a right to create my life in freedom. I do not have the right to throw myself on your views and get into your face. But what can happen is when I'm creating my life, there are people going to accept that energy, that vibration that I am, and they'll want to dance together. And that's what we're building. We're building a community here called Agape. Built on unconditional love, built on non-judgment, built on non-attachment, where there is a freedom to be and express. One of the things you'll know about me as you come through classes and you hear me more and more, I don't ask you to believe a single thing I say. Please don't. Test everything for yourself. Find out if it works for you. I'm also going to say this, because we got a whole series beginning next week. It's going to be an 8-week series that we've got our study groups based on, and it's going to be very deep. We're going to really start to explore and go deeper and deeper and deeper. So if I would invite you in the next 8 weeks, channel this as your place to come, because we are really going to take this down. We're going to find out who we are, what is our purpose, why we are here. And we're going to explore this not only on Sundays, but we're going to explore it in our small groups where we get to discuss it, we get to express it amongst people of our peers, and no one's going to tell us what's right or what's wrong. It's there, and what we're doing by this is we're going to allow you to connect with 8 to 10 to 12 other people so that you have a support group, so that when you walk into this center, you don't just know 1 or 2 people, but you've got now 10 people. 12 people that know you, that know who you are because you have said, this is my dream, this is who I desire to be. And you'll have someone there during the week when you share with them. I'll share with Lee. Lee will be my prayer partner, okay? Because there's 2 Lees, and Lee's a beautiful name, don't you think? I love the name Lee. I didn't when I was a kid. Do you know why I didn't like the name Lee as a kid? Because it wasn't like anyone else's name. Is that silly? I love the name Lee now because I'm unique. There's only one person with the name Lee in this room that's spelled L-E-E. Am I right, L-E-I-G-H? There's another Lee that used to be with the children who still comes. And, well, my son's got my middle name, but that's beside the point, Stephen. There's another woman, she's L-E-A. I used to call her Leah. She says, no, it's Lee. I said, no, it's Leah. And I found out I was attached to me being the only Lee. Isn't that interesting? I got attached to the material spelling of a name. See how simple the ego comes into play and screws with our heads? And that's what we've got to remember. Our ego will always be coming into our heads and playing games with us, and we have to ask the question, is this our heart speaking or is this our ego wanting to control? Anytime we're trying to convince someone of something else, that's ego. And really, when we try to convince someone of anything, what it means is we're really trying to convince ourselves. Because when we believe something, we don't have to share, we don't have to argue with anyone. We just know it. Oh, you believe that? Well, that's great, fine. What do you believe? Oh, that's great, fine. You don't care because you believe. You've identified who you are, and you see, everyone's going to have a different belief about what their purpose in life is. So to not care about what someone else believes, to accept them as they are, means you're honoring the child of God in them. You're loving them as Jesus would have said. Love them as them perfectly. Let them be perfect. Let them be themselves. There is no word perfect. You see, you're really causing me you're causing me. Speaking with you on Sunday is causing me to question all of my words. There's no good or bad. There's this or that. Because to say there's good or bad means something has to judge. Well, we have already determined if God is all there is, God's not judging itself, right? So the only judge is humankind. Well, to that. Let's give humankind a raspberry. 1, 2, 3. That's it. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3. That's right. It's a simple thing. See how it makes you laugh? Beverly, I didn't mean for you to spit on yourself. Some people really took this seriously. You notice why there's no people in the front row right here? I tend to be like Shamu. I spread water. I remember one time when I was at the Center for Spiritual Living and I was an assistant minister, there were people in the front row and I really got animated. And it was just flowing and they were fighting off. Next time I spoke, there was no one there. I guess that race consciousness has continued. The one thing I want to close with is this. This law that's creative, it's always working. We can't turn it on, we can't turn it off. It is always working. As much as we would like to say, my mental atmosphere is not where I want it to be, and I know that my mental atmosphere is creating, can I just shut it off for a while? No, it's going to keep working. So what do? We have to change the mental atmosphere, and that's a process. And so understanding that's a process, we must be patient. You see, we must be patient, persistent, and consistent. PPC. I could go patient, consistent, persistent. That's PCP. That's a reason to legalize marijuana, isn't it? It's a spiritual thing. I want you all now to think about that. If you think about the idea of why are drugs so... Ooh, do I want to go there? Why are drugs so frowned upon? Because it causes you to think beyond what the rules are. I'm not saying to do drugs, but the biggest issue about drugs is they cause you to think beyond. That's why the penalties for hallucinogenics are greater than the penalties for other drugs, because hallucinogenics, LSD and that take you beyond anything. You go to other dimensions where you see possibilities greater than that. All of the people that I know, like Ram Dass, that talk about this idea, when I saw what was beyond, when I saw into other dimensions, I was free of this worldly domain that I've been brought up in. But you see, the key thing is you don't have to do drugs to get there. Meditation, being in silence and setting an intention within, you go there. But remember, it doesn't happen like this. It's a gradual deepening. It's a gradual awakening. It just is the way our human mind is, because we have to expand the atmosphere. If our atmosphere is this, it has to get to this, then to this, then to this, then to this. And that's where the work is. That's where the effort is. So to become more in oneness in that, there's effort. It's called daily spiritual practice. That's what we don't do on Sundays, but that's what we do during the week, and that's what we teach in our classes. Without spiritual practice, all of this is hooey. You're hearing that? Because nothing changes. You just come, you get some great music, you listen to a talk, you either like it or don't like it. You walk away feeling good. There's a lot of hugging and loving and going on, but the lives don't change, because come Tuesday, all of this is forgotten and we're back into numbness. To be unnumbed, to be alive with life, means to be aware, which means we take control, we practice. Next week, I'm going to talk about the question, who am I? It's going to be a great idea, because it's going to give you the opportunity to determine, who are you? It's going to give you the opportunity to consider, what have I been lying to myself about? And what is it now that desires to come forth and be known about me? Remember this, as the infinite expression of God, there is no time. So it doesn't matter how old you are, because now is the beginning point. It is eternally the now. So a changing happens now. I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask you to go to our website. Once there, click on the Contribute button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to the world. I would also ask you to please share this message with anyone you feel might benefit. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Agape community as together we bring joy to life.